Welcome back, everyone. In this section, we are going to look into components and architecture of Hyperledger Fabric. In the previous section, we have learned about Hyperledger projects, which comes under the subsections distributed ledger framework, libraries, and tools. So, to refresh your memory, Hyperledger Fabric is a distributed ledger framework and it is intended as a foundation for developing applications with a modular architecture. So, in this section, we will have a deep dive into the components and architecture of Hyperledger Fabric. So, in this section, as we know that we will be looking into architecture and components of Hyperledger Fabric, let us first get to know what are the components that we will be looking into. So here are the list of components that we will be looking into. First one is PO, next is ordering service, Fabric certification authority, Fabric ledger, channel, smart contract or chain codes, endorsement policy, membership service provider or MSP. Now let us go one by one. Now let us look into what do you mean by peer? As you can see from the slide, peer is a fundamental unit of Hyperledger Fabric network. Peer maintains a ledger and a smart contract. Adding to this, peers are fundamental elements of the network because they host instance of ledger and instance of chain code. Each peer can have multiple chain codes and ledgers. Peers have special but chain codes that are always present by default. Peers communicate to each other by using gossip protocol. A single peer is owned by a single organization, hence a single peer is associated with one single MSP. We will learn about what MSP in the later on. So there are different types of peers in Hyperledger Fabric network. First one is anchor peer, then leader peer, endorsing peer, committing peer. So what do you mean by anchor peer? So every organization must have one or more anchor peers so that those anchor peers can communicate to other anchor peers of other organization using gossip protocol. Using anchor peers, the peers in the organization get to know about the peers about other organization, the peers present in the other organization. What do you mean by leader peer? This peer node receives a new block from the orderer and shares it with other peers using gossip protocol. What do you mean by endorsing peer? Endorsing peer has chain code installed on them and endorsing peers simulate and endorse transactions. What do you mean by committing peers? Committing peers verify endorsement and validate transactional result before committing transaction to the blockchain. Peers can be created, started, stopped, reconfigured, and it can even be deleted. They expose a set of APIs that enable administrators and applications to interact with the services that they provide. Now, let us understand how peers and channels will come together in Hyperledger Fabric network. As you can see from the diagram, if you consider this as the network, which is N that is depicted over here, if you consider this as blockchain network and C as a channel, you have an application A which is connecting to the channel C. So channel is internally connected to P1 peer and P2 peer. Each peer, which is P1 and P2, has the smart contract S1 installed on them and it has its own ledger, which is ledger 1, which is L1 over here. So this is the simplest form of the network. As we move forward in this section, we are going to complicate the network and in the end you will get to know how all these components work together. This is the explanation of the previous slide. So peers and applications. So as we have seen, applications are used to connect to peers in the previous diagram. Let us see the definition. So application always connect to peers when they need to access ledgers and chain code. The Fabric Software Development Kit or SDK makes this easy for the programmer. Its API enables applications to connect to peers, invoke chain codes to generate transactions, submit transactions to the network that will get ordered, validated, and committed to the distributed ledger and receives events when this process is complete. So there are two types where the transaction to and from the peer can be categorized into. One is ledger query and ledger update. We will see what do you mean by ledger query and ledger update in the next slide. Now, as we have seen before in the previous slide, which is you have two types. One is ledger query and ledger update. Let me explain you what do you mean by ledger query and ledger update. As we have seen, ledger query is a three-step process and ledger update is a five-step process. Ledger query, in case of ledger query, application connects to the peer P1 which you can see over here, and then application invokes the chain code to P1. Once it is invoked, peer invokes the chain code with the proposal, and chain code generates a query response, and that response will be propagated back to application. So this is the query response that happens between application and peer. When it comes to the other form, which is the ledger update, which is a five-step process. So application wants to update the ledger instead of querying the ledger. So this is a five-step process because the application needs to talk to peer and peer wants to update the ledger. So as part of this process, application connects to peer, then application invokes the chain code. Peer internally invokes the chain code with the proposal. Then chain code generates update proposal response. After that, the response is propagated back to the application. Next, the request of the transaction is sent to the orderer. As part of that, order sends the transaction to the peers in blocks. So orderer takes the transaction, bundles into blocks and sends it to all the peers. And as part of the next step, peer updates the ledger using the transaction block. After that, the peer sends the ledger update event to the application. So at the end of this, the five-step process gets completed. So this is the difference between the difference between the ledger query and ledger update. Moving on, so this is the explanation that I have given in the diagram. So you can go through it and please understand the concepts. It's very important to understand the next component and how the network works in its entirety. Now let me explain peers and organization and how they are associated. As you can see, consider this as a network which is represented as N. So as you can see, you have a channel C and you have some circles around it. So from this, what you can get is, so there is P1 and P2, which is connected to the channel, and there is an application A1 as well. And all these three entities are managed by organization 1. It's the same with organization 2 as well. There's application 2, there are three peers, P3, P4, P5. It is being managed by organization 2 and it connects to the same channel which is C. Then you have another channel which is ARC3 and you have application 3, P6 and P7 which is connected to the channel and it is handled by or managed by organization 3. You have P8 and application 4 which is handled by organization 4. So this is how the channel, application, POs and organization comes together in case of Hyperledger Fabric network. This is the explanation of whatever we have explained in the diagrammatic process. So please go through this. If you don't understand, read through it again until you get it. So in the next session, we are going to look into what do you mean by peers and order, how peers and orderers work together. So ordering service or orderer is an important topic. So we are going to cover that in detail. So after those sessions, it will be clear for you that how peers and orderers communicate with each other. Next is peers and identities. Peers have an identity assigned to them via a digital signature or digital certificate from a particular certification authority. Each and every peer in the network is assigned a digital certificate by an administrator from its owning organization. So we will cover what is this certification authority and the related topics like MSP in the coming section. But for time being, you should know the peers and identities are always associated together. That is it for this lecture. So we are going to look into ordering service and how it is related to peers and how it's going to affect the fabric network in the coming lecture or in the next lecture. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next section.